I am Glen, if we haven't met already. I'm from Australia, but I've lived half my life in the UK now. And so pleased to be with you. I've been interviewing people with very interesting stories all week. And we've talked about city success and banking high flyers. And we've talked about anxiety and depression. And we've talked about losing loved ones. And this afternoon, it's been a long week. This afternoon we're talking about the pain of losing a child. And we're here with Tracy. And you are among friends, aren't you, here?
I am. I'm very lucky. I'm so blessed. I've got so many lovely people in my life here today. So I've got my school mums over here. I've got my lovely friend Angela. I've got my church posse. I've got my family and friends, Debbie. And my mother-in-law's carer. There's a whole range of people here, and I'm so grateful for you coming, because I am feeling a bit scared, obviously, opening up to you all about a kind of private but painful part of my life.
Right.
But also I'm aware there are several people in this room who've lost a baby or babies, and I hope this isn't too painful for you, but hopefully something might come out that is of help to you.
Yeah, well, you're very much among loved ones, and Tracy wants you to know that she has given me permission to be nosy.
Yes.
Yeah, can I do that?
Yes, you may.
I'll ask nosy questions on your behalf, and we'll get into some very sensitive, very raw areas. And you've also given me permission to be, in your words, lordy. So I'm Charlie Church here. Tracy will bring the reality. And I can bring a bit of Bible stuff at the end.
Absolutely.
Is that all right?
Well, I'm aware, often, when you talk about being a Christian, it gets very jargony, and my heart really goes out. I'm sensitive to that. So, yeah. Hopefully.
Okay. I'll bring the lordy later.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, Tracy, you kind of grew up in a sort of church-going home and that sort of thing. Was that part of life to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very privileged in that I was brought up in a Christian home. Both my parents, well, actually, my father wasn't initially, but my mother was very much a strong Christian. I come from a really big Christian inheritance. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, my aunt, and now my brother were all missionaries in Africa. So, I was brought up in a Christian home. Mm-hmm. We used to go to church every week. My mum used to take us faithfully, me and my brother and sisters, to church every Sunday. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. At that point, my father wasn't a Christian. And I kind of went through the motions. I was very happy memories, mm-hmm. Sunday school. It was all kind of okay. Yeah.
And if I'd parachuted into your life age sort of 18 and I said, so Tracy, who is Jesus to you? Like, what would you have said, do you think?
At the age of 18?
Yeah, let's say that.
At the age of 18, I'd completely revolted against it.
Okay.
Around about 13, in fact, my dad quoted this in his wedding speech. I went through the revolting years, and I was revolting. I mean, in every sense of the word. I was drinking, smoking, lying, doing everything, I guess that you hope your 13-year-old wouldn't do. Mm. And I just totally turned my life back on church. I just didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. And yet, were there any thoughts about Jesus? Like, if I had cornered you and said, yeah, I know all that revolting stuff, but like, what do you make of this guy Jesus? What would you have said?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If I'd had a gun put to my head, maybe I would have said something like, I had a deep-rooted, sort of vague seed there, I think. Because all my family around me were Christian, and I thought, well, kind of, they can't all be stupid. If they all believe in this, there must be something involved in it, all my aunts and uncles and cousins. And so I guess, but yeah, I was much more interested in enjoying, having a good time, doing my own thing, going my own way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And what was your maiden name?
My maiden name was Guilbeault, which is Guibault in French.
Okay.
And yes, when I gradually became a Christian, we'll talk about that in a minute, I was often renowned as not Tracy Wilde, and I was always renowned as, oh, you're Peter and Elizabeth's granddaughter. Oh, you're Simon's sister, because all my relatives were very involved in the church. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And then you became a wild woman.
I did become a wild woman.
Okay. Did James turn you wild?
Yeah, exactly. Wild by name, wild by nature.
Okay. How did you meet him?
I met him when I was teaching at Caldecott, a boys' prep school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who liked who first?
Well, that's another good question, because to this day we can't agree.
Okay.
It was.
I thought you were about to say we don't actually like each other. Like, okay.
It was a drunken snog one night, and we still can't remember or acknowledge who went first.
Simultaneously, then.
Exactly.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Your lips locked across a crowded room. Okay. And so you got married in '99, is that right?
That's right. We got married at 99. At the school where we work, it was a wonderful day, wasn't it? Really hot day, all our friends and family there. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, happy times?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was still kind of doing my own thing, going my own way, great fun times. Yeah, this was a long time ago now. It is 20 years ago.
Yeah, back in the 1900s.
I know.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for that.
So, and then you wanted children to come along fairly soon, or what was the plan?
Yeah, I think we didn't rush into it. I mean, James did very well because he was a cradle snatcher. I'm 8 years younger than him, so he did well.
He did well.
So I didn't really think about it initially, but then we sort of got our heads around it and thought now might be a good time. So, yeah, we started trying for family, and then we had 3 years of infertility and sadness and issue over that. And eventually I had endometriosis, and that was diagnosed, and I had that treated. And then, yeah, we fell pregnant.
You fell pregnant?
I fell pregnant.
You fell pregnant, and how did that feel?
Yeah, it was very, very exciting. Yeah, very exciting, as you do.
Yeah, yeah. Any sickness, any kind of... No, it was just... You bloomed?
Oh, I don't know about that. I wasn't really... I didn't really do the whole
You don't
pregnancy
do the blooming?
thing.
Yeah,
no.
okay. Yeah.
No.
Just,
Yeah.
no nonsense?
No, I didn't really... I don't think I did. It was... No.
Yeah, yeah. Don't do any of that nonsense. That's great. And then you told us a very, very tragic thing just earlier today. At 38 weeks,
Yeah.
you went swimming as normal, and that was just part of the routine?
I really took care of myself with my pregnancy.
Yeah.
I used to go swimming quite a lot, and I do pride myself. I did not have a single drop of alcohol through my pregnancy. So, because, you start afterwards thinking, what if I'd done this, what if I'd done that? And I'd just gone for my regular swim, and I came home. I came home, and some French friends of mine had come over for lunch, and I said, we've just got this routine midwife appointment. You stay there, we'll be back in 15 minutes. Left them with getting lunch ready, and we went to down to the doctor's surgery, and my hideous midwife at the time, I won't name her, but she was hideous all the way through my pregnancy, just did the routine Doppler thingy, and I was going to say she went pale, but she was dark-skinned, so she looked uncomfortable, and she panicked and said, you need to get to hospital. So we got in the car, we drove to hospital, and obviously I had a sense that something was wrong. I was a bit panicky. I got on the phone to my parents, and even though I didn't have a faith then, I remember, I think I said to Mum, you need to pray something's wrong. And then we got to Wickham, and we were taken up to the delivery ward, and they scanned me, and I remember at that point seeing the screen and seeing the baby, but the baby wasn't moving, and then they said, I'm really sorry to have to say, but there's no heartbeat.
What's that like, to hear those words?
Oh, I can't really remember now. I mean, it was just disbelief and shock and numbness, and yeah, it was total disbelief. And weirdly, I can remember saying and thinking at the same time, when can I have another baby?
Wow.
That's kind of a bracket. I don't know why. It was just all very confusing.
Yeah. Who was with you at that time?
Just James and I.
Yeah.
So James and I. So I can't remember that piece, but James took me back to my parents, who were in Bern at the time, and we rang them on the way home. Or James must have rung them and said that it's bad news. We need to come round. Went back to my parents' house. I went and sat on the bench at the bottom of the garden, and the first thing I remember doing was I sent James out to get me a packet of cigarettes. I hadn't smoked through my whole pregnancy, but I needed a cigarette, so I had a cigarette. I was sitting there on the bench, and this little Robin came and sat with me on the bench, and my mum cooked a supper. It was very surreal. And then we had to go back home, pack a bag to go back to hospital, which was very confusing because I had a bag packed for me and a bag packed for the baby. And I was like, what, a bit crazy. So I sort of took one baby grow and a nappy. Well, I won't need a nappy. Is your phone ringing?
It might be,
Can't
yes.
believe that's
I
your
know,
phone ringing.
Isn't that terrible? Shamed.
That's hilarious.
Shamed.
Can't believe
If
it.
your phones are on, I would advise you, under pain of
That's
death.
so unprofessional.
Anyway.
Just sitting there. That's brilliant. I got you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Where were you? Yeah.
Where was I? So yeah, I had to go pack a bag. Randomly got a bag together. We went to hospital. Again, hideous. You're admitted to the delivery room, the what do you call it, labour ward.
Right.
So you've got all these people around you and crying babies and screaming, and you're put in this famous left-hand room. My friend Jane's here. She'll remember this room, and Julia. In the left-hand room where they put the couples whose babies have died. And then we had to start the whole labour process.
So you were induced? Or?
Yes, I was induced. Yes, I was induced. And they explained, because my first reaction was, get it out. I didn't have this association with a baby yet, so I was like, get it out. There's a dead baby inside me, get it out. And they explained to me that actually that's not the right thing to do. You need to give birth psychologically in terms of the start of your healing and in terms of your physicalness, and if there's such a word, physicalness, and in terms of future pregnancies.
So a long labour?
Yeah, gosh, I can't remember. Yeah, it was over a day and a half or something.
Oh my goodness.
But no pain. That was one thing they did. You
Okay.
know, I said, look, I'm going to deliver. But they gave me spinal blocks and whatever else. Yeah, no pain.
You knew you were having a girl?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
So whilst this was going on, James, was saying, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to give this boy or girl a name? And so we decided that it was helpful for both of us to have a name for either a boy or a girl. And so in the end, James chose the name Robin because it was a friend of his growing up. Because we needed a name that fitted both girl and boy, obviously, because we didn't know. Oh. And this is one of his friends from university who'd taken his own life, but he was really close to. And also because of this Robin on the bench moment, and it just felt right. So from that moment, she was Robin before we even knew if she was a girl or boy.
Why do you think that's important? Because one of the human instincts would be, like you said before, I've got a dead baby inside me, get it out.
Yeah.
So part of you is thinking, I want to detach from this.
Yeah, totally.
But to give her a name is to very much attach. Why was that important?
Oh, this is one of those questions I'm going to ask you for help with. Why was that important? Well, yeah, I mean, this baby was my daughter.
Right.
Was part of me, part of James. It was part of the bonding process, I guess.
Right.
I don't really know.
Yeah. She was yours. And she should not remain an it.
No.
She is real. She is your daughter.
I need to show you a photo of Robin at this point, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've got a photo of her.
Yeah.
I was worried about doing this because it might be too sensitive, but I'm proud of my daughter. I don't know if you can put it up, guys.
Yeah, are we ready? I'm asking the people in the room. Are we ready to see Robin? Yeah, we've got a proud mum, and we want to see a beautiful daughter.
I was worried we weren't sure about whether to do it. This is Robin. I mean, my precious Robin. She obviously had died in my tummy 2 or 3 days before she was born, so her skin is a bit peely and she's a bit red and her lips are a bit red. But, that's Robin. She was born at 7:05 on the 24th of July, 2004. You can see that's a picture of me. I mean, even though she's dead in my arms, it's still a photo of a proud mummy.
Do you remember that photo being taken?
I do. My mum was with us through the whole time, and she was the one that pushed for it. Because at the time I didn't want it. And she pushed for it and took these photos. I think there's one more of James and I and her in that infamous room. Both of us looking at our daughter, obviously the tears, the pain, the anguish. And the real overriding word for me was confusion.
Right.
I was so confused by the whole thing.
Right.
Because
Right.
here I had my lovely daughter, and
Yeah.
we don't need
Yeah.
that slide yet, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So then we had her in our room for a while and cuddled her and talked and cried like I've never cried before.
Yeah.
And then they took her off and put her in, I guess, a cold room. Don't know what they do with them.
Right.
And then brought her back to us the next morning.
Okay.
And we said goodbye at that point, and then we left the hospital.
What was the worst part?
That was probably the second to worst part. The second to worst part was leaving the hospital literally empty-handed. I'd arrived with a baby in my tummy, and I'd left with a flabby tummy, still in my pregnancy clothes, but with no baby. And we got a taxi to pick us up. And if you know Wickham, you go down the hill, round the roundabout, and back up the hill again. And it was just like, and the guy, the taxi driver, obviously picked us up for maternity, and he was asking us stupid questions.
Oh, no.
And we were just like, shut up.
Right. Right.
And then the second worst part was when my milk came in 3 days later. It came through at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my boobs were enormous, and of course, the milk had nowhere to go. And I remember curling up in a ball in our bedroom, rocking up and down, just not knowing what to do with myself, the agony and the anguish, and obviously your female hormones. It was just the lowest point of my life, I think.
You mentioned about your cab driver saying that, the wrong things. There are a lot of people here in this room. We want to comfort people who are going through horrible situations. What are the bad things to say? What are the good things to say? Is there anything that can be said?
Well, I've learnt through this, I used to be, I still am. We are all sinners, aren't we? But I've learnt through this to try not to be judgmental, because you have no idea what sort of stuff people are going through. And so now I'd never ask anybody, is this your first? Or, have you got any other children or whatever? Because you just don't know what's going on in people's lives.
Yeah.
In terms of what really helped me was people talking to me and acknowledging her and asking me about her and allowing me to talk about her, because even though she wasn't alive, she's still my daughter, very important to us. Those of my friends and family who are around me know that. We've got photos of her all over the house. We talk about it. My little niece is here today, Sadie, who's 3. Happy birthday, Sadie.
Happy birthday, Sadie.
And, they all talk about Robin,
Yes.
with their children.
Yes.
So it's a kind of death is open in our families.
Yes.
We
To the
talk
point where you had a funeral for Robin?
We did. We had a funeral. I can't remember the date, but it was about a week later. James took charge of that. That was his part in the grieving process. He put together an amazing service, and she was buried she's buried in Marlow, but we had the service in Cookham. And again, that was hideous, in the hearse, is that the word? Car. We had Robin in between us, this little coffin, and then he walked down the aisle holding Robin. Again, all very surreal.
Little coffins are the worst objects in the world.
Yeah, they are.
To see a little coffin. And
now she's buried in, this little part of this cemetery in Marlow where all the babies are buried. It's sad.
And today, if I ask you, so how many children do you have? What do you answer?
I know, well, that's a particularly difficult one for me, for many reasons. But depending on the people, I will answer differently.
Yeah. How long before you tried again for children?
Well, again, that's an interesting one. And my friends who are here who've lost babies will relate to this, because where's Jane? My lovely friend Jane here. I might start crying now. My lovely friend Jane, she lost Charlie and Toby, twin boys, around about the same time as Robin. And we met at the Child Bereavement Trust. We met this amazing lady called Jenny Thomas, who became our bereavement counsellors, and we met at this sort of counselling session, a group kind of thing, where we had to do these sand statues. It was all a bit naff, but anyway, I remember sitting next to her, and I remember turning to her and going, "Is it wrong that I want another baby straight away?" And she went, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that. So do I."
Right.
And again, when you talk, I call them my dead baby friends, but I must find another name for it, because that's not really great. But when I talked to my dead baby friends, we all had the same feeling, didn't we, of just wanting to have another baby. And it wasn't because I wanted to replace Robin, but there was this maternal longing.
But you'd had 3 years of trying before Robin,
Yeah.
so did you fall pregnant again?
I think we
soon?
did, and then it
Yeah.
was terrifying.
I'll bet.
It was absolutely terrifying. I was up at Wickham Hospital, not Wickham, because I couldn't go to Wickham because it was the association. At Wexham, every 5 minutes in the fetal assessment unit being monitored. I was panicky, and I made it through to 36 weeks with my daughter Amelie and 37 weeks with my son Archie, and they did an early cesarean in both times because I just couldn't go there.
Yeah, and that was a conscious decision. Let's not go to 38 weeks. Yeah. And healthy deliveries and...
Hideous. I mean, let's be honest. They were both cesareans and horrible, and I felt them both. They said that if I'd had another child, they probably would have had to have knocked me out because I felt it. And again, not easy. Millie was on the billy bed. Is it called a billy board? Billy bed, the blue light thing, because she was jaundiced for a week. And Archie was in special care for a week because he was out too early. So he was in the... It's again a very terrifying part.
Right.
I remember asking the consultant, is he going to live? And, they weren't able to say it initially because you can't, because you don't know, and the whole suing thing. But in the end, because of my story, he did stick his neck out and say he is going to live.
Okay. So you've been on such a roller coaster, and I asked you, aged 18, where is Jesus in all this? And you'd had your revolting years, and then you've had the worst tragedy it's possible for a mother to imagine. Yeah. So,
where did I go?
What did Robin make you think about God?
Well, it was a sequence of events, really. So, my parents came to this church, and actually my sisters did as well. As young children, they used to go on all these summer camps and stuff. But I'd never been. I'd come on Christmas Day and stuff, I think. And having lost Robin, I was feeling very angry, very confused, and I was thinking, where is she? And I was drawn to come to church. So James and I came to church. We sat in the back row in the old days, and there were pews. We sat in the back row and wept the whole service. And Will was preaching in the pew, which used to be up here. And he's a monkey, isn't he? He clocked me. And he was talking, I don't know what he was talking about, and one of the hymns was Great is Thy Faithfulness. And I remember standing up and thinking, this is absolute crap. Yeah. Great is Thy Faithfulness.
Talking about God's faithfulness through all things.
What's this about? My daughter's died, what is this about? And I felt really angry, and we got up to leave a bit early, and Will, being Will, ran down the driveway and caught us up with us and, found out who we were. And... So that was the first sequence. And then he came round to our house, as only Will can do, because he's very persistent. He came round to our house, and I was sitting outside with James. And he did this whole 2 ways to live thing. Okay. This 2 ways to live is like a little way of helping you to understand the whole Christian message about 2 ways to live, either yourself, being in charge, or letting Jesus be the rule of your life. And he did this thing, it's a little 6 drawing thing. He did it on a scrap piece of paper for us, and then went off. And I remember James and I thinking, that's a bit surreal, a bit of a lecture, what's that all about? So that was the second sequence. And then the third sequence was that literally the next night, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this was Saturday the 4th of September, 2004. Actually, there's one step before. I then decided to go on the Christianity Explored course here, which I'm sure you'll plug, because that's your gig, isn't it? I came and did the Christianity Explored course here, and had loads of questions, obviously. And during this process, I woke up, as I said, on the 3rd of September at 3 a.m. in the morning with the words, Matthew 3, verse 8. Matthew 3, verse 8. And it just kept going round and round in my head, Matthew 3, verse 8. And I couldn't get back to sleep. I tossed and turned. I swear this happened. Matthew 3, verse 8. So I went downstairs eventually. I was wide awake, and I found my Bible. This is the Bible that my parents gave to me on my confirmation, on my baptism, on the 23rd of March, 1985, to Tracy on her confirmation from her mummy and daddy. And I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I picked up my Bible, which you can see has had a bit more use now. And I opened up the Bible, and I swear on my life, it fell open at Matthew 3. And this was the verse, produce fruit in keeping with repentance, which is Matthew 3, verse 8. And I've written it, underlined it in my Bible, and wrote the date. And I was like, what the heck is this about? Yeah. So I went back to bed. And the next day, I phoned up Will, persistent Will, and said to him, what's this about? And he tried to explain it for me. So it was taken from a passage in Matthew where John the Baptist, who was he? He was like
the forerunner to Jesus, preparing the way
Yeah.
for Jesus, pointing to Jesus. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So he was amongst a group of the Jewish leaders, and they were all professing to be really, strong Christians and all this sort of stuff. And he basically said, "Oh, you brood of vipers! You're all sorry, not
Hypocrites,
in that way.
all
Not
that
way.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
You're all hypocrites.
Yeah.
And what you need to be doing is being true to yourself, to turn around, to accept your failures, turn around and repent and come towards me." And so in order to produce fruit, you need to in order to produce fruit to be, what's the word?
In order to be fruitful, you need to repent, which is to turn back
Yeah.
to Jesus. And
And I'm still trying to figure that out, Glenn. And it's still, it still puzzles me. And I'm still trying to figure that out. And I have so many questions still. I have my doubts.
Right.
And my pattern of my life, I'm sure lots of you can relate to this, is that I kind of go my own way for a while, do my own thing, this is fun, and then something happens, and usually a catastrophe or something, and then I turn back, come back to Jesus, and surprisingly, I start to produce fruit again. And that applies in my marriage, in my friendships, in my parenting. And I truly believe that it took such a tragic situation for me, given my character, my nature, and my stubbornness, I describe Robin as my wake-up call.
Wow. But why turn back to Jesus? Because if there's a God who can allow that to happen, surely that's a God you should turn and run the other direction from. Why would this make you turn to God?
Well, it's a source of comfort for me. When Robin died, I was like, help, where is she? And I thought, she's got to be somewhere. Yes, she must be in heaven. She must be in heaven. And these sort of childhood memories came back. And a deep sort of hidden faith, I guess. And I thought, right, so if she's in heaven, then I can no longer pick and choose what I believe in. This is ridiculous. I need to investigate it.
Okay.
So that's when I did the Christianity Explored course. And I looked at the details, I looked at the evidence, and I made a choice. And at the end of the day, it's about making a choice. And it's not an easy choice, and I find it difficult living that way sometimes, and I don't always get it right. But yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you two final questions. One of them is going to be a bit of a lordy question.
Oh, gosh,
just
okay.
so you know. Just brace yourself. Now, with what you know from the Bible, and we've all got questions, I've still got loads of questions, but how do you practically put together a good God and the kind of suffering you've experienced? How do you put together suffering and a good God? How do those...
Yeah, I still find it very difficult to understand. And certainly if people ask me that question, I'm like, help. That's the question I need help on.
Yeah.
But I do believe that God exists. I've investigated. I do think it's true. I look at the world around me and creation and, the intricacies of baby making and all this sort of thing. And ultimately, I do believe that when we die, there's eternal life. And there has to be hope, surely. There has to be a reason or whatever. And I do believe now that this is a Lordy question. You're going to expand on this, aren't you?
Yeah. Let me do the Lordy stuff. Yeah.
So I don't know if did I answer that?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Well,
I don't think I did.
I think if you embrace Jesus, he allows you to make sense of how horrible losing a child is, in a really deep sense. That if there isn't a good God, then what happened to you is just unfortunate.
Yeah.
You just got unlucky. Whereas I think and I think everyone in this room knows, what happened was wrong. Unconscionably, intolerably, horrifically wrong, right? But if it's wrong, there must be something that's right. Do you know what I mean? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so if someone wants to investigate, as you said before, if someone wants to look into these things, what advice would you give? You can either give us motivation to look into these things or practical steps on how do you take it forwards. What advice would you give to someone wanting to look into these things further?
Well, there's loads of things, really. I mean, The first is a classic advertising moment, isn't it? Which I guess you'll do too, is the whole Christianity Explored course thing.
Yeah.
Which they run here at church once a term.
Yeah.
Really non-threatening, unheavy environment. You go along, listen to stuff. It answers really big questions like, what about pain? What about suffering? Which I find difficult to explain, but who is Jesus? What's it all about? Science, all those kind of topics. And as I said, I did it about 3 or 4 times, and I still have questions. I think we all do, So that's one way. It's a really unthreatening thing to do. Talk to a Christian friend, maybe. I've got some seriously amazing Christian friends in this room who have walked alongside with me and continue to walk alongside with me because it's such a journey and it's such an adventure and it's ongoing. Come and check this church out. It's really normal. I mean, not all Christians wear sandals and A-line skirts and, whack you on the head of the Bible. We're all kind of normal. And what else?
That's good.
Is that a good start?
That's like 3. That's amazing. Amazing.
I know.
Wow.
I'm doing well.
Get you. Are you going to be around afterwards for a little bit if people want to catch up and chat?
Yeah, sure.
We've been so appreciative of what you've shared with us, and I think your openness will allow us to think and to process these things with honesty because you've been honest. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you very much, Glenn.
Let's show our appreciation for Tracy Wild. So what am I going to say to be lordy at the end? I don't really want to be lordy. I just want to take seriously Tracy's story. And in particular, I want to take seriously 2 things about Tracy's story. And I think everyone in this room, whatever your beliefs, I think we all want to take seriously these 2 things from Tracy's story. I think we all know the answers to these 2 questions. Whatever you believe, you know the answer to this question. Is losing a child wrong? Is it wrong with a capital W? Is it outrageous? Have you seen small coffins? I'm a Church of England minister. I have to take these funerals, okay? Have you seen small coffins? Is that wrong? Or is it just unlucky, unfortunate, painful, but heck, life's random, so some people are going to get lucky, some people are going to get unlucky. What is it? Is losing a child wrong? Wrong with a capital W? I think we all know the answer to that question in this room. Secondly, does Tracy have 2 children or 3? Yeah, we know. She's got 3. We know the answer to that question, right? But only Jesus makes sense of those 2 answers. See, the lordy stuff makes sense of life as we know it. Because there is a God of faithfulness, a God who has suffered with us, and a God who promises life beyond this suffering. Because of Jesus, he makes sense of real life. Because of Jesus, losing a child is wrong. It's not just painful and unlucky, it's wrong. And because of Jesus, Tracy has 3 children and not 2. And she has hope that she will embrace Robin again because of Jesus. What do I mean by that? Well, do you know C.S. Lewis, author of the Narnia books? He was an atheist for many years until wrestling with the subject of suffering made him think about God. And in particular, he started to realize that when you suffer, you don't just go, ouch. You go, why? But that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, why not? If everything is random, nothing is wrong, is it? If We are just psychology that boils down to biology, that boils down to chemistry, that boils down to physics. Then we're just molecules bumping into each other, and some people are going to bump into each other in a happy way, and some people are going to bump into each other in an unhappy way. That's all that's going on. And when tragedy strikes, you don't say why, because if everything's random, nothing is wrong. But we do say why, and we do say that is wrong. And C.S. Lewis noticed if something is wrong, that means there must be something that's right. If there is wrong with a capital W, then maybe there's right with a capital R. If there is evil with a capital E, then maybe there's good with a capital G. That started him on the road towards Christian faith, actually. He was just making sense of our everyday experience of a world that is not just painful, not just unfortunate, but a world that is wrong. C.S. Lewis said, if you've never seen a straight line, and if you never have any concept of a straight line, then there's no concept of a crooked line either, right? Because what is crooked if there's no straight? If there's no straight, then lines are just lines. They're neither crooked nor anything else. They're just lines. You can only call something crooked if there's something that is straight. And there's only wrongness if there really is rightness. And the Bible says that before and beyond and beneath this world, there is rightness. There is goodness. There is a way that things are meant to be. And one wake-up call to God is when you see the way things are meant to be. And that's a lovely wake-up call. Okay, there's a beautiful sunset and you think, this is the way things are meant to be. That's one wake-up call to the fact this world is not all there is. But there is another wake-up call. And that wake-up call is when you encounter pain and grief and loss and you realize this is not the way things are meant to be. This is crooked. But if there's crooked, then there's straight. If there's wrong, then there's right. If there's evil, then there is good. Do you think losing a child is wrong? I think everyone in here knows it's wrong. I invite you to start trusting in Jesus because that will make sense of your real life experience of the world. And then the second question, does Tracy have 2 children or 3? Tracy started to piece things together, holding Robin in her arms. Is this it? It seems unconscionable to think this is it. When you see the wonder of life, could it really all be extinguished? Could it all be snatched away by tragedy? Or is there something about life that is bigger than death? Do you think there's something about life that is bigger than death? Again, I invite you to begin to investigate Jesus because he starts to make sense of that. He is someone who is full of life, who, according to the Bible, overcame death, went into death and came out the other side. This doesn't answer all our questions at all. Tracy still has questions. I still have questions. I'm paid to know the answers to some of these questions. I don't know them, okay? I've got some ideas about some questions, but it's not that I've got everything neatly tied up in a bow. None of us do. But I know that the death of a child is wrong, and I know that Tracy has 3 children. What do you think? I just want to finish by taking you through a tiny story from John's Gospel. We've got these John's Gospels. Do you know in the New Testament there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these biographies of Jesus. And John writes this story of what it looks like when the God of love actually enters into our suffering world. What's that like? How does God and suffering go together? Well, you can read John's Gospel and you can see what happened when a God of love entered a suffering world. And the God of love suffers. Because that's what love does, right? When love sees the beloved suffering, what does love do? Love enters in. Love suffers alongside. And so there's this story. I've got it. Where have I got it? Where have I put? There we go. There's this story in John chapter 11. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. He's very close to Lazarus. The one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Isn't that infuriating? Isn't that baffling? Isn't that maddening? Do you see little number 6? That means it's verse number 6. That little word, so, doesn't that make you want to throw the Bible against the wall? So, like, he loves everybody. Verse 5 says he loves the whole family. So he delays, and he delays, and he delays. And Lazarus ends up dying. Loving God, he allows the situation to get far, far worse before he makes it much, much better. And that's what Christians have come to see over time, that God allows things to get much worse than we were ever prepared to accept. And then turns things to a happily ever after, far greater than we ever dared dream. But that's the pattern. He loves everybody, and then he allows the nightmare situation to eventuate. On his arrival, God shows up late to the funeral. This is a strange story, don't you think? God shows up late to the funeral. Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. We've skipped a few verses, by the way. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Jesus gives to Martha the lordy answer. Okay? She says, Jesus, what are you doing? And Jesus brings Bible truth. He gives her a little Bible study, and that's what she needs. She needs the lordy stuff, right? That's Martha, one of the sisters of Lazarus. But there's another sister called Mary. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. How did she say that? What was the tone in her voice? I wonder whether she's accusing him of malpractice. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You know, the Bible is full of those kinds of words for God. In the Old Testament, there's a book of Psalms. There are 150 songs in which people are constantly saying, Lord, where are you? What have you done? This is intolerable. What are you doing? That's okay. You can say that to God. Mary says it to God. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse of the Bible. It's one of the most powerful. Martha, the older sister, she needed the lordy stuff. She needed the Bible verse. Mary just needed someone to cry with her. And here is God. He shows up late to the funeral, and then he outcries everyone else present. Isn't this a crazy story? Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? These are the questions that people still have. They're questions that I still have, questions that Tracy still has. And in a sense, the answer to those questions is not a series of intellectual propositions. The answer to these questions is a person. The God of love who shows up late to the funeral. But he outcries everyone else at the funeral. And then he raises the dead man. When Jesus had said these things, we've skipped some verses. Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen, and a cloth was around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Jesus allowed things to descend far lower than anyone was prepared to go. And then he raised things to a happily ever after, far higher than we dared dream. And Christians will tell you that this is the story. It's the story that makes sense of all our suffering. We do have to go down into suffering. There is suffering for all of us to walk through. But don't give up on God in the midst of that suffering. If you give up on God, you give up on those two things that we all know. We all know that losing a child is wrong. Don't give up on that. And we all know that Tracy has 3 children, not 2. Don't give up on that. Because if you stick with this God, you have a God who will walk with you through that suffering and who can raise us again to a resurrection hope. You know what resurrection means? It means Tracy and Robin will hug each other. Okay? That's what resurrection means. And Jesus says these verses to us. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing me will never die." Do you believe this? I don't know how to finish. Anyone know how to finish? It's nearly time, so I guess we better stop. Do you mind if we just be quiet just for a second? And can I say a short prayer? Would that be all right? Would that be all right? Let's just bow our heads. God of love, there is a lot of suffering in your world. And you show up late. And you seem to allow it. Jesus, would you show up in our suffering? Would you weep with us? And would you lead us to your resurrection hope? Amen. If you want to take things further, we've got a short video that can let you know what steps you can take to investigate Jesus further.